Welcome to the Y Podcast.
where we discuss mindful learning in the virtual space.
So happy to have our special guest and elite educator, Brendon Boitano. And Brendon, you have a lot of fans at Elite. I reached out to one in particular to just get a kind of overall look at how you impact your students. And this person said, Brendon is a dynamic force in the classroom. He's engaging, funny, but most of all, knowledgeable. Brendon is exceptionally talented, organized, and dedicated to his work. His students adore him, and he imparts a range of knowledge to them that makes them very fortunate to experience his class. Brendon's depth of knowledge as a history and AP psychology teacher is unmatched, and his assignments are creative, fun, and memorable for the students. Every aspect of his teaching is innovative, and he has the gift of getting his students to love learning. He has mastered providing individual feedback and follow-up support. He develops a strong rapport with his students and is very accessible as a mentor. I often overhear him giving excellent guidance to his students when they ask for advice. Brendan sets high but not unreasonable standards for his students and then gives them the tools they need to succeed. That was, of course, from Ruthie Chatton. And she also, when we were talking about this, added the aside that both of her daughters had the opportunity to take your class, your US history class, and would genuinely describe you as their favorite teacher. So you're doing great things, Brendan.
I Wow. I like no words for that. That was awesome. Thank you guys.
Okay, we'll jump right in then, Brendan. Can you tell us about your journey here at Elite, your journey to Elite?
So I've spent a decade working for independent study charter schools. Um, Previously, I was in the classroom as a history teacher and a mentor teacher to students. And then this is now year 3 at Elite for myself as a teacher of record.
Well, we're so glad you're here. When we started talking about sitting down and having this conversation, I was so excited to see your topic. Um, I think it's incredibly important and one of the critical parts of our work. But let's go ahead and get into it. What is the significance of bringing the student's individual story into the learning space?
So for me, bringing that story in, right? We're a choice school. They are coming to us for a reason. They have a story as to why they're coming to us. It could be needing more independence, more flexibility. It could be the traditional model did not work for them. So to make personalized learning work, right, we need to understand what brought them to us. Now as a TOR, right, I get one-on-one time with my students, so it's very easy to kind of start pulling on those threads as to why they're here. None of those stories can be forced. I feel like they very much need to be authentic. I feel like they need to be like through consistency, right? Like consistently showing up and understanding that students are students. They are high school students. They are middle school students. We've all been there. Their number one priority always isn't being the perfect student, right? So understanding the whole person behind them and everything that they've gone through to lead them to where they are on their learning journey.
And maybe we could jump to impact for a second, Brendan. So, how does that opportunity to share their story impact like the whole vibe of the classroom? Meaning, how does it impact the student? How does it impact the peers in the classroom? And how does it impact the teacher?
I think it just sets a culture of everybody understanding like what's going on for other students. And it gives a space, like a safe space for students, right? Like I'm happy to jump in when needed to talk about my story. I often have students who are juniors and seniors. The question starts coming up, right? Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your life? Like all those big questions. And I'm authentically honest with them. When I was a junior or a senior, I had zero idea. And I will tell them, if you told me I was going to be a teacher, I probably would have laughed at that age, right? Like I didn't know what I didn't know. So I let them know it's okay to not know those things, right? So like that was part of my journey that I bring in, and I want them to know that their journey is the same.
Ruth talked about it. You're talking about it. You do more than create a space for them to tell their stories. You use those stories to build your relationship, right? And obviously, your relationships are going to be at various levels with different students as you go through that process. Describe for me, just so we get a better view of that impact. What's the difference when you have an established relationship with a student, and you have that trust that you described, what does that look like for them in terms of their participation in the curriculum, your class, and even just their kind of outcome in this process?
Right? When you have that trust and that established relationship, right? It's almost like you're able to give them a push when they need it. You're able to give them a hug when they need it. Like you're able to meet them where they're at because they feel safe in confiding, they feel safe in talking to you, and you're able to help support them in their journey at a much better level, like in being able to motivate or push or whatever we need to do.
Yeah, and that relationship, I mean, it takes time to build. Like you have to set aside time in your instruction, in your classroom, and time is not always like it's not always a resource we have a lot of. Um, but looking at the importance of that, what happens when you don't like when you haven't had time to build that relationship? What do you see when that relationship isn't established? What does that look like for a student?
I feel like students are less engaged, and they're less likely to take risks, right? When they understand that like it is, as Derek would say, a judgment-free zone in classrooms, and like we're able to support and we're there to support, they're much more willing to take a risk in whatever you're asking them to do. When you don't have that relationship, it is very much a struggle to get them to understand that. And when they come to us, they don't have that relationship with a teacher. They don't have somebody that they trust on a campus, that they can confide in, that they can like trust that will always have their back and continue to show up for them. And that's what I love to be able to do for my students.
Yeah, and you even see sometimes not only do they not have that relationship, but sometimes they actually they've had past relationships where it's damaged their ability to trust, and you
Right.
have to kind of work through that.
One of the things I've found, and it's almost a common thread when students come to independent study schools, is a lot of them do not like to ask questions because teachers in a traditional setting don't seem to always have time for them, right? Like they kind of get pushed off because of that time piece. So they don't want to ask the question, they don't want to ask for the extra help. And it's like we got to undo that with our relationship to then have them understand that we are here to support them.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up that idea of risk, right? Because our students, you can't make significant changes, growth, leaps without taking a risk, right? A leap of faith. What are some of the questions or some of the ways that you've gotten students to open up and give you that meaningful student response you're looking for to start building that relationship?
So depending on the situation, right, I'll ask them why they're here, right? Like
Mhm.
why they came to us. That kind of gives me an idea, right? Is it sports and they need the flexible schedule, right? That gives me an in to start to undoing those threads of those questions of their story, right? Is it that they really struggled in another school and right, and they're looking for something that might work for them, right? And I can start working it that way. I always try to start with the relationship piece first, like the social emotional stuff. Like I always ask a high and low of the week, right? I try to remember if they're playing a sport, like, oh, you had a game this weekend. How'd that go? Right? Like those little moments to continue to build that relationship so that they know that I'm listening and will trust that relationship and those conversations.
You got into it a little bit earlier when you talked about like how you share with students that when you were 10th or not 10th, but like 11th, 12th grade, you had no idea you were going to be a teacher. But can you talk more about the importance for teachers to share their stories with their students? If you
I,
dive more into that.
I mean, obviously, we have to do it in a way that is careful, right? We don't want to just share all of our lives as a teacher, but I think that students need to know that we are human, right? We've gone through things that are similar to them. Um, I don't always tell my students like why I became a teacher, but when I feel that moment is right, like I weave that into a conversation and I let them know like how I ended up finding my like path in this life, right, into education. And it was because of another teacher after lots of things that happened in my life that were very much pain points. Um, so I let them know that like the reason I do these things is because somebody did this for me. Yes, I think it is very important that we let students know we make mistakes. We're not perfect. We are human, right? We have good days and bad days, right? We continue to try to strive to be better, just like they should be doing.
What do you think that does going for their participation? You're sharing those those experiences that you've had.
Once again, based on their background and their story, we have some students who don't like to share those things, right?
Mhm.
But I feel like the more that we are able to do it, the more that we are able to show that human side, that we are a full person, right? Like not just, it's not just work that I do, right? I do lots of things outside of work. I'm able to share that with my students, just like I want them to share that it's not just the schoolwork we want to talk about, right? It is the sports, it is the clubs, it is bad things, like things that happen that are lows in their week that we can talk through, that like help support in that learning journey.
In your history class, you had this really great activity where you would share like artifacts from your life.
Mhm.
And I think that's just such a like, and it had multifacets for what you were accomplishing through that activity. But again, that's another, I think that's an example of this, like you being open with yourself as a person, which allows them to feel comfortable in being open with themselves. Um, so I just, yeah, you're doing wonderful work, and it really does uh so much exponential learning happens when we have real, genuine, honest relationships with our students. And you're just an incredible model of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm a huge believer relationships over rigor, right? To start, right? Those relationships are the key foundation. It's kind of like Maslow, right? Without that
Mhm.
bottom level, we cannot get to that upper level.
I think it definitely helps if they've built up a wall, like bring that down and then lets them relax and then get their ideas out there and their creativity and their willingness to share.
It goes right, like, hand in hand with what you're saying, like, that, intellectual and emotional safety factor is, like, so important. It's foundational. Like, how are you gonna move forward in your learning if you don't have that? So, Brendan, you are doing wonderful things.
Thank you guys.
So, Brendan, our final question for you is what is your why?
My why is to impact as many students to make them lifelong learners as possible.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Brendan. I think this conversation is incredibly valuable to all educators, and I'm glad you were able to share this with us today.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for
Talked
being
about
here.
it. I mean, earlier you talked about it like it starts with the why, like why are you here? Why did you choose us? But that
Mhm.
why question keeps coming up over and over again. And if you can be creative about them exploring their why and finding ways to relate their why to your what your driving instruction is, then I mean that's where you get really that exponential learning, like powerful connections. Like this is why I'm here. So now I'm really engaged in exploring and delving into
I
this.
mean, my whole idea behind teaching like AP US history wasn't that they're going to be history majors or love history. It was like, how do you get through this course with this much dense material, and how do you study best to be
Hmm.
successful in your life when you get to a college class?
Right.
Like that was my goal, right? Like, how do you take what we're doing here in a much more um, safe environment on a high school campus, and then take that to right the rest of your life to continue to work through something and to study the best and do whatever you need to do. That's just how I always thought of those courses, right? Like I was teaching life skills more than I was teaching content. And I
Yeah.
still feel that
Yeah.
way as a TOR, right?
Yeah.
Like as a TOR, that's my job. So I'm
Yeah.
teaching life skills the whole time, which is why I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for staying and chatting
Yeah.
with us a little
Yeah.
Of
more.
course.
Really
It's been a good
appreciate it.
time.
Thank you
Will
guys. You
do.
guys are
Yeah.
Yeah.
doing amazing, amazing things. This is
Oh,
so awesome. I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Thanks for
pretty
just, yeah, we're
fun.
doing it.
lucky we get the opportunity to sit down with teachers like you
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
give you a voice and so you can share your story.
I-
Yeah.
I'm I love you guys for doing this, and I love our group and everything that we
Uh,
do is
Yeah,
it's been pretty awesome.
definitely.
yeah, we're pretty lucky.
We are.
Yeah,
I
I
love
would
it.
agree. I think we
Cool.
all found an awesome spot and an
Yeah.
awesome place to work.
That was such an amazing reminder from Brendan to make sure we take that time out to connect with our students, hear out their stories, and find out their why. Why are they here with us? Um, yeah, and not shy away from opportunities to share our stories with them.
Yeah, and I think it's worth repeatedly coming back to that question of why, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. It starts like, why did you come to us? Why is this school working for you? But then as you continue to work and building that relationship, there's more answers to that question. Like our why isn't like it isn't singular, right? It is
Right.
dynamic and it changes, and
Yeah.
it's good to keep checking in with it.
Yeah, even why are they still here? And it helps to remind them themselves as well. Like, okay, yeah, this is why I'm here. This is what I want to learn or get out of this for myself. So
Yeah.
I think
And it,
Brendon, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and the why it might be messy too. Like he got like their why might be messy, and there might be like some heartache, that goes along with it, but it's definitely necessary to hear that piece of their story.
Am in awe kind of Brendan's natural ability to weave the student's story in there in such a way that the student is almost, but they're relaxed and they just flow into it, and then that lets them break that barrier and they can then enter into their own creativity and their own synthesizing, really, and probably without them even realizing that that's happening.
And I left him, he was very vulnerable too, Brendan, sharing that he didn't know he wanted to be a teacher in his later high school years. And I think that's pretty awesome. Like he's doing an amazing job as a teacher. So whatever his why and his journey was, um,
Right.
it may have been messy, but or non-linear, but yeah, it's worth sharing that, because I think students maybe sometimes think can be a very clear cut journey, and it's not always.
Right, right. That we
Yeah.
struggle with our decisions as well. Well, we have one final question for you, and that is, what is your why? Tell us in the comments. Thanks for watching.